Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with Keep Arizona Blue, where we get into all things politics over a cup of coffee. My name is Ava Campbell, and today I'm so excited to be joined by activist, influencer, and founder of Gen Z Girl Gang, Deja Foxx. Deja has been on the front lines of reproductive justice advocacy since she was a teenager, and since she's become a leading voice for young people in politics, serving as the youngest staffer on Kamala Harris's presidential campaign and championing equity and representation across the board. She's been recognized by Vogue in their prestigious 21 Under 21 list for her powerful work, and she recently ran for Arizona's Congressional District Seat 7 and was able to raise over $1 million, showing the power of young people running for office. Deja, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Ava. I'm so excited to chat.
Yes, perfect. So we open our show by explaining the mug that we brought with us. So I'll go first. So I brought my Harris
Oh,
mug.
we're gonna be matching.
Tan, no way. Yeah, keep it on my desk as a little reminder to be hopeful. But yeah,
So I'm already severely caffeinated for the day. It is 2 p.m. I'm two iced coffees deep, but I put a little bevy in this mug. This is from the 2024 campaign as well. But this image to me is so powerful because when I worked on the Kamala Harris campaign in 2019, one of our big breakout moments was in the debate where her and Joe Biden went back and forth. And there was this moment where she's talking about busing and she says, that little girl was me. And it was this moment that really, I think, captured the intersection of personal story and politics and what brings people to the work that they do. And this image reminds me of that moment. It was something we put on shirts and otherwise, and it lived into 2024. So that's the mug that I grabbed.
I love that. Okay, so for our first question, we're going to go all the way back to your high school days. And obviously,
I'm scared.
you got involved in politics and advocacy at such a young age. What was it that first brought you into this political world? Was there a specific moment or experience that lit that spark for you?
Yeah, I always like to tell folks that I didn't pick politics. It wasn't like I was sitting, selecting a major, right? Or even, as an answer to the what do you want to be when you grow up, politics picked me. And that's because I was raised by a single mom here in Tucson, and I relied on Section 8 to keep a roof over my head and food stamps. So that way we had, dinner on the table, Medicaid, so I could go to the doctors when I was sick or needed a physical to play sports in school. I mean, every aspect of my life was touched by policy. And so for me, getting involved in politics, through the lens of change making and storytelling and advocacy was deeply personal. I started showing up to school board meetings when I was 15 years old uh, because the sex ed that I was getting in my Tucson Unified School District school was last updated in the 80s, and it didn't mention consent, and it was medically inaccurate. And for somebody like me, who at the time was homeless, was working at a gas station, living with my boyfriend, um, I realized that it wasn't, rather that students like me were going to fall through the gaps, right? That I wasn't getting the information that I needed to be successful. And so that's where my advocacy journey began. I didn't get my start in electoral politics. I actually got my start in issue area advocacy, grassroots organizing, showing up, storytelling at community calls, asking my friends to come along and do the same.
Yeah, that's so inspiring to hear because I feel like a lot of people and a lot of young people assume that politicians are these sort of faraway figures who haven't gone through the same experiences as the rest of us. They don't know what it's like to struggle or to get food on the table or to keep the lights on. And I know that that's not true, but still, it's so empowering to hear a young political advocate like yourself talk so openly about these experiences and show us that we're all the same and that we all want what's best for our futures and for our families' futures. So yeah, so circling back to your age, like I said, you became involved in politics at just 15, still in high school, and again went to be the youngest staffer on Harris's campaign, as well as a young Gen Z candidate here in Arizona. Navigating spaces that are often dominated by older individuals couldn't have been easy. Did your age ever feel like a barrier? And how did you learn to take up this space with confidence as a young woman in these rooms?
Yeah, so I mean, that first advocacy experience, like I said, I was 15, a sophomore in high school. I didn't have a fancy degree or a title. What I had was my experience. And if young people listening take one thing away from this conversation, I want them to know that they are an expert in their experience, right? That when you show up to a town hall meeting or a school board meeting or a meeting with a senator or a congressperson, those people work for you. They are accountable to you, and your experience of the policies that they put in place qualifies you as an expert in that conversation, right? And so, that's really what I hope young people take away from that advocacy experience that I went through as a teenager. But when I was 19, I went to work on the Kamala Harris campaign. And it was a first for me in so many ways. I was the first in my family to go to college. I got a full ride to Columbia University. I moved to New York City, a city that, quite frankly, before applying into Columbia, I had never even been to. And I had done my first year of studies before getting offered this job. And it required me to drop out, withdraw from school, move to a city I had never been to, Baltimore, and start a job as influencer and surrogate strategist, a full-time digital strategy role that didn't exist before I got there. And I said yes to that role because I saw myself in this candidate, right? I'm a first generation American who was raised by a single mom, an Asian American woman. All overlaps between me and, the then candidate Kamala Harris. Um, and what I'll share is that my first day on the job was not easy. I was stressing. I was calling my mentors. I was texting my friends. I was crying in the bathroom because I was so nervous. Um, and at my orientation, with a few other, new hires, my boss at the time put on the screen an image, and it was a photo of all of the past United States presidents, right? All of whom look pretty similar. And the next thing he said to us was that there are people who had more years of experience than us, who had better connections than we did, but that we were hired, selected to work on this campaign because of our perspective. That every day we weren't just tasked with doing the work of our job, right? But bringing the communities that we are a part of in with us, right? That meant that when I was sitting in a meeting about digital strategy or video, I was also bringing the perspective of someone raised by a single mom, and why it was so important to highlight that shared experience of me and this candidate, right? I was bringing the perspective of being a first generation college student to conversations around student debt. And so that first campaign experience really shaped me as an advocate and later as a candidate, because I knew that the perspective that I uniquely bring, the identities I hold, the experiences I have come through matter, and they connect me to people. And when we think about what is politics, right? In so many ways, it is about connection.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. I myself am raised by a single mom and I'm a woman of color. And as a
Yeah.
high school student, I've often found that when I speak to my teachers or adults or even, other family members, my perspectives are sometimes dismissed simply because of my age. And it can feel like my thoughts are seen as less valuable. So seeing, a woman like yourself achieve such success and mobilizing others is not only impressive, but it's incredibly inspiring and validating to the millions of others young, teenagers. So, and the fact that you took a non-traditional route by leveraging social media makes your impact even more powerful, which ties in really well to our next question. Is what role do you think that social media plays in modern activism, both the pros and the cons? And how do you think that other Gen Z Democratic candidates can use it effectively to advance their causes?
Yeah, so you and I were both Gen Z, right? We are the first generation of young people to come of age online, right? We use Instagram and TikTok like a first language. It's not something we have to learn, it's sort of something that grew up with us. And that leaves us in a really unique position I talked about coming on to the Kamala Harris campaign, the 2019 primary, one of the youngest staffers in history, the youngest on my campaign at that level of leadership, and coming into a job that didn't exist before I got there. And that is because the digital landscape around us has changed so drastically from 4 years to 4 years to 4 years, right? Every cycle, presidential cycle, the way that the internet has changed in that time is uh, sort of unfathomable. And so it is young people like you and me who are the experts in that. And so I want to just say that we are in a really unique moment for young people to take up positions of leadership, not just in campaign world or even in politics, but across industries because of the kind of expertise we are building day to day on platforms like TikTok and Instagram. And those are real strategies, right? The ways that you connect with people online, build new friendships, develop community around you, like those are strategies
Mhm.
that can be applied to causes you care about, candidates you support. Now, I want to take us even further back because my first viral moment was nearly a decade ago. And that was when I was 16 years old. After that school board fight, I scaled up my work, right? I developed my storytelling capacity, and I showed up to a town hall with then Senator Jeff Flake. He was a Republican, and he had voted to defund Planned Parenthood centers under the first Trump administration. And now this cut to Title 10 was the program that I had used when I had no money, no parents, and no insurance to get birth control at no cost to me, right? I walked into a center and I walked out with the care I needed to take control of my body and my future. It was integral to my ability to go on to be the first in my family to go to college, right? Remembering that I worked at the gas station, I was living with my boyfriend, right? Um, and in this viral moment, I stood in line, waited to ask my question, and asked why he, as a middle-aged white man, was making these decisions about me and my body while dodging his constituents, refusing to talk to us. And he told me he supports policies that support the American dream. And I asked him why he would deny me the American dream if birth control was helping me to be successful, reach for higher education. He said, "Thank you." And I said, "No, thank you." And the next day I woke up and millions of people, to date, something like 18 million people have watched that video. It's used in trainings on bird dogging for youth movements. And what is so fascinating about this moment in my life and in our political situation, our media ecosystem, is that for one of the first times in history, it was possible for a 16-year-old girl working at a gas station, living with her boyfriend, experiencing homelessness, to be on even footing in the public discourse with the United States Senator, right? And not because gatekeepers at CNN decided I was respectable or important enough to talk to, not because I had some fancy title, right? But because millions of people resonated with the sentiment and the story and elevated this issue to the front of the narrative. And so, because of it, the next day I was live on CNN. I went and lobbied on Capitol Hill. The Washington Post called me the new face of Planned Parenthood. And what I want folks to understand in these twofold situations, either that viral moment when I was 16 or, the job I walked into at 19, is that because we are in this moment of digital transformation, it is an opportunity for young people to demand leadership internally in campaigns, and organizations, and externally as the drivers of the narrative of our political landscape. What is important? Who gets to, lead? And then, just to zoom forward and sort of take it to the conclusion, which is that I ran a campaign for 104 days. It was a sprint of a congressional run. And when I started, I was alone in my bedroom. I was literally filling out the paperwork by myself, and I did it wrong because I didn't know what I was doing. And I had no campaign manager and no staff and no money. And in the span of 104 days, we accumulated something like 100 million impressions on our campaign content. And that's not just, right, we can think about that as a number, or we can think about that as people. These are people who experienced a piece of a special election on an off year in a primary in Arizona and got engaged. felt the need to share and like and feel hopeful around this content. And it translated into 100 press interviews that changed the narrative about young leaders, and $1 million raised, 99% of it from small dollar donors. So, that is not commonplace. If you start looking into the finances of both Democrat and Republicans, you'll see that how uncommon it is to raise that kind of money from small dollar donors, from regular folks, right? People like you or me who have like $20 to pitch in. And we reached 30,000 donors. And by the end, I didn't win the Democratic nomination, but we had something like 4 times increased our share of the vote from the first poll that came out to election day. Which shows a real momentum and excitement around candidates who can harness social media to talk not just with young people, but the people we've left behind, right? And as I look forward, I believe that we have to measure our wins, especially under this Trump administration, where we are having a very difficult time stacking up true wins, in as many ways as possible. And when I look at the wins of that campaign, the strategies we built that make it possible for young working class people without connections or boatloads of money to run viable campaigns where they can raise funds, get in, make a difference, is the kind of thing that I am so excited to share going forward.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly when you mentioned that, millions of likes and comments are not just numbers. There's people who heard your story and your narrative, and these comments are just not random. They are people sharing with you and trying to communicate with their, candidate. And I think that's something that a lot of potentially older politicians are overlooking. Wrapping up with our final question is, what advice would you give to young people, especially young women of color, who want to make a change, but they don't know where to start?
Yeah. I understand that social media has its pros and its cons. And I think one of the cons, especially for young women, uh, is comparison, is that I should be doing things the way somebody else is doing them, right? And I want to caution you against comparison at all costs, right? Like whether it is professional or aesthetic, whatever your comparison may be, I want you to let it go, and know that you should do the thing that only you can do. That has been one of the guiding forces as I decided to drop out of college as a first generation student and go work on a campaign, to hop into a race that I knew was going to be an uphill battle, right? To do the things that are hard because I knew only I could do them, right? And so I hope you take that with you. Um, and if you're looking to get more involved in politics, if you feel like, oh my God, we're cooked, the world is on fire, like what am I supposed to be doing right now? The answer is the thing that only you can do. So while my advocacy may have looked like, working behind the scenes of a campaign or running for office myself, that does not need to be what your advocacy looks like. If you are a photographer, message a down ballot candidate and ask if you can shoot one of their next rallies. You would be so surprised at what a big difference that can make, especially when people are running on tight budgets. If you are someone who makes incredible narrative content, right? Day in the life videos, come to a door knocking shift for your local race and capture it, share it with the campaign. If you're someone who doesn't want to be on camera, but you've got those video editing skills, I can't tell you how helpful it was to have someone who I could send clips to and be like, please, I'm so tired tonight. Can you just help me get these together? So really think about the skills that you have, connect them, whether it's with a candidate or a mutual aid group or a nonprofit, and offer your skills. I had a girl that I went to high school with and I hadn't spoken to in, probably 6 years, shoot me a DM and be like, hey, I do graphic design. What can I help you with? She ended up designing our merch, some of our street signs, and it took a huge load off of our campaign in terms of our overhead costs because we had folks who were willing to devote their talent. And so That's my big takeaway for young people who are looking to get involved, which is to identify the talent that you have, and then find a way to apply it to a community or a cause or a candidate that you're passionate about.
I love that advice. It's really easy to kind of look at politics as a black and white sort of thing, but it's so easy to, intertwine your other interests and passions with it and yeah, use it to your advantage. Okay, so wrapping it up and to end on a high note, you as an influencer yourself, we're curious on who your favorite influencer is.
Okay, so I have like major beef with the word influencer.
Ooh, okay.
Which, I think we've had already a very deep conversation about age and gender. Um, and if I'm being honest with you, this term influencer, I think is uniquely applied to people like me because I am a young woman. And that anybody else who used social media to run a congressional campaign, had worked the behind the scenes of a presidential campaign, would not have that term applied to them in the same way. Now, that being said, I am a girly who loves the internet, who is absolutely unashamed of the screen time I have racked up. But when I look at who is changing the narrative, um, who is putting content out there that's really connecting with folks, um, and doing it in a way that I actually absolutely cannot. I think of some of my favorite like white guy influencers. Like my favorite is probably Jolly Good Ginger. He is a veteran and an organizer and has millions of followers online, but you can catch him in the streets. Me and him were just together protesting outside of the Heritage Foundation in DC. Because if you don't know this, we are nearly halfway through the completion of Project 2025. I also think about people like Walter Masterson, again, one of these guys who plays a completely different role than I do on the internet. He goes out and does these on the street interviews. He disrupts big dollar Republican fundraisers in a way that truly might be dangerous for someone like me. But I admire his interview style content. And those are two of my favorite guys out there right now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, that wraps up our session, but thank you so much, Deja, for joining us. You are truly such an icon to so many of us and definitely a force to be reckoned with in the political realm. So thank you so much.
Ava, well, wait, can I ask you a question before we go?
Yes.
Okay, who is your favorite follow right now? Who do you think is doing it right on the internet? Like, as a young person in Arizona working in politics, like, I want you to know that you are the target demo. Like, people want to know what you have to think, or what you think, what you have to say. So, who's your favorite follow these days?
That is a great question, turning it back on myself. I think I'm going to keep it sort of local. And I'm going to say over the summer, I did a lot of research about Katie Hobbs. And like you said, I don't think a lot of people would consider her an influencer, but hearing
Yeah.
what she posts about and how she's, going against the Trump administration is really inspiring to hear. And I love like learning about it through social media. I'm like, oh, she did it again. So I'd have to say that she's honestly one of my top picks right now.
It follows. Awesome.
Yes.
I appreciate your time and your thoughtful questions.
No, thank you.
And
I
I'm
appreciate
cheering
it.
you and the Keep AZ Blue team on. The work you all are doing is so important. We are seeing a serious backslide in terms of young people engaging with our party. And, we've lost ground in 2024 with young people for the first time in decades. And the work that you all are doing in this crucial swing state could not be more important, not just on the election cycles, but every day in between. So thank you for your